2 Chronicles 1. Solomon, the son of David, strengthened his hold over his kingdom. Hashem, his god, was with him, and he made him very great. Solomon spoke to all of Israel, to officers of the thousands and of the hundreds, to judges, to every ruler in all of Israel, and to all the heads of the families. And Solomon, along with all the entire congregation, went to the high place at Gibeon, for God's tent of meeting, which Moses, the servant of Hashem, had erected in the wilderness, was there. However, David had brought up the ark of God from Kiriath-Jearim to the place that David had prepared for it, for he had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. But the copper altar that Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, had made was placed before the tabernacle of Hashem. So Solomon and the congregation sought it out. Solomon brought up offerings there before Hashem, on the copper altar that was before the tent of meeting. He brought upon it 1,000 burnt offerings. That night God appeared to Solomon and said to him, "Request what I should give to you." Solomon said to God, "You have done a great kindness with David my father, and you have made me king in his place. Now, Hashem, God, may your words with my father be fulfilled, for you have made me king over a nation as numerous as the dust of the earth. Now grant me wisdom and knowledge, so that I may go out and come in before this people. For who can judge this great people of yours?" God said to Solomon, "Because this is what you had in your heart, and you did not request riches, property, honor, or the life of your enemies, nor did you request a long life, but you requested wisdom and knowledge, so that you can judge my people, over whom I have made you king. The wisdom and knowledge are granted to you, and I will even grant you riches and property and honor, such as kings before you have never had, nor will there be such a thing after you." Solomon, who had gone to the high place in Gibeon, went to Jerusalem from before the tent of meeting, and he began his reign over Israel. Solomon assembled chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 riders. He kept them in chariot cities and left some with the king in Jerusalem. And the king made silver and gold as common as stones in Jerusalem. And he made cedars as abundant as sycamores in the lowland. The source of Solomon's horses was from Egypt and from Kiev. The king's travelers brought them from Kiev for a high price. They went up and brought out a chariot from Egypt for 600 pieces of silver, and horses for 150. Solomon's traders would also export for all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram. Solomon then proposed to build a temple for the name of Hashem, and a royal palace for himself. 2 Chronicles 2. Solomon counted out 70,000 men who carried burdens, and 80,000 men who hewed stone in the mountain, with 3,600 people overseeing them. Solomon sent word to Huram, the king of Tyre, and said, "Just as you did for my father David, when you sent him cedars to build himself a house to live in, behold, I am building a temple for the name of Hashem, my God, in which to sanctify him, to burn incense spices before him, to set a permanent stack of showbread, and to bring burnt offerings each morning and evening, and on Sabbaths, and on new moons, and on the festivals of Hashem, our God, a permanent duty upon Israel. The temple that I am building is large, for our God is greater than all gods, and who can gather enough strength to build a temple for him? For the heavens and the highest heavens cannot contain him. And who am I to build a temple for him, except to burn offerings before him? So now, send me a wise man to work with gold, silver, copper, and iron, and with purple, crimson, and blue wool, and who knows how to cut engravings, along with the craftsmen who are with me in Judah and Jerusalem, whom my father David prepared. Also, send me cedar trees, cypresses, and almogs from Lebanon, for I know that your servants know how to cut down the trees of Lebanon. Behold, my servants will be with your servants, to prepare numerous trees for me, for the temple that I am building will be great and extraordinary. Behold, I have commissioned 20,000 cores of wheat as sustenance for the lumbermen, for those who cut down the trees, for your servants, and 20,000 cores of barley, 20,000 baths of wine, and 20,000 baths of oil. Hiram, king of Tyre, responded in writing, sending to Solomon, "In Hashem's love for his people, he has placed you as king over them." Hiram said, "Blessed is Hashem, the God of Israel, who made the heavens and the earth, who gave King David a wise son who has intelligence and understanding, who will build a temple for Hashem and a royal palace. Now, I have sent an artisan who understands wisdom, who has worked for Hiram and for my father. He is the son of a woman of the daughters of Dan, whose father is a man of Tyre, who knows how to work with gold, silver, copper, iron, stones, and wood, and with purple, blue, linen, and crimson fabrics, and how to cut all kinds of engravings and make all kinds of designs that might be presented to him, with your artisans and the artisans of my master, your father David. And now, the wheat and the barley, the oil and the wine that my master has mentioned, let him send them to his servants. We will cut down trees from the Lebanon according to all your needs, and we will bring them to you as rafts on the Sea of Jaffa, and you will bring them up to Jerusalem." Solomon counted all the foreign men who lived in the land of Israel, besides the census with which his father had counted them, and they were found to be 153,600. He made 70,000 of them carriers of burden, and 80,000 of them hewers in the mountain, with 3,600 overseers to direct the people's work. 2 Chronicles 3. Solomon then began building the temple of Hashem in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where he had appeared to his father David. He established it at David's place on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. He began to build on the 2nd day of the 2nd month in the 4th year of his reign. These are the dimensions of the foundations laid by Solomon for building the temple of God. The length, in cubits like the original measurement, was 60 cubits, and the width was 20 cubits. The hall, whose length ran along the width of the front of the temple, was 20 cubits long, and its height was 120 cubits. He overlaid it with pure gold. He covered over the large chamber with cypress wood, which he then overlaid with fine gold, and he drew palm trees and chains on it. He overlaid the temple with precious stones for splendor. The gold was Parvaim gold. He covered the temple, the beams, the side posts, its walls, and its doors with gold, and he engraved cherubim on the walls. He then made the chamber of the Holy of Holies. Its length, along the width of the building, was 20 cubits, and its width was 20 cubits. He overlaid it with fine gold, using 600 talents. The weight of the nails was 50 golden shekels. He also overlaid the upper story with gold. In the chamber of the Holy of Holies, he made 2 cherubim with the appearance of children, and they overlaid them with gold. The length of the cherubim's wings was 20 cubits. The wing of one was 5 cubits, touching the wall of the temple, with the other wing being 5 cubits, reaching the wing of the other cherub. The other cherub's wing was 5 cubits, reaching the opposite wall of the temple, with the other wing being 5 cubits, touching the wing of the other cherub. The wings of these cherubim thus spread out over 20 cubits. They stood upon their feet, facing the temple. He made the curtain out of blue, purple, crimson, and linen fabric, and he embroidered cherubim upon it. He made 2 pillars in front of the temple, 35 cubits in length, and the cover for its top was 5 cubits. He made chains for the partition. He also put them on the tops of the pillars, and he made 100 pomegranates, which he placed on the chains. He erected the pillars at the front of the sanctuary, one on the right and one on the left. He called the right one Jashin, and the left one Boaz. 2 Chronicles 4. He made a copper altar, its length 20 cubits, its width 20 cubits, and its height 10 cubits. He made a sea of cast metal, 10 cubits in diameter, circular in shape, 5 cubits high. A 30-cubit line could go around it. It had figures of bulls under it, surrounding it all around, 10 per cubit, circling the tank all around. 2 rows of bulls, which were cast with the casting of the sea. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea was on top of them, and their haunches were toward the center of the sea. Its thickness was a handbreadth. Its lip was like the lip of a cup, with a rose blossom design. Its capacity was 3,000 bath measures. He then made 10 lavers, placing 5 on the right and 5 on the left, from which to wash. They would rinse the parts of the burnt offerings from them, while the sea was for the Kohanim to wash with. He then made the 10 golden candelabra according to their specification, placing them in the sanctuary, 5 on the right and 5 on the left. He then made 10 tables, setting them in the sanctuary, 5 on the right and 5 on the left. He also made 100 golden bowls. He then made the courtyard of the Kohanim and the great courtyard area with doors for the courtyard area, and he overlaid their doors with copper. He placed the sea at the right side of the temple, eastward, opposite the south. Hiram also made the pots, the shovels, and the bowls, and Hiram finished doing the work that he did for King Solomon for the temple of God. 2 pillars, the 2 basins and capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 2 nettings to cover the 2 basins of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the pomegranates, 400 for the 2 nettings, 2 rows of pomegranates for each netting to cover the 2 basins of the capitals that were on top of the pillars. He made the stands, and he made the lavers upon the stands, the 1 sea and the 12 bulls under it, the pots, the shovels, the forks, and all their vessels Hiram made, as his father would have, for King Solomon, for the temple of Hashem, from pure copper. The king cast them in the plain of the Jordan, in firm clay, between Succoth and Seredah. Solomon made all these articles in vast number. The weight of the copper could not be determined. Solomon made all the articles for the temple of God, and the golden altar, and tables with the showbread upon them, the candelabra and their lamps of fine gold, for kindling as required in front of the inner sanctum, with their flowers, lamps, and tongs of gold, the finest gold, the musical instruments and the bowls, spoons, and pans, all of fine gold, and the doorway of the temple, its inner doors for the Holy of Holies, and the doors of the temple, that is, the sanctuary, of gold. 2 Chronicles 5. When all the work that Solomon had done for the temple of Hashem was completed, Solomon brought that which his father David had sanctified. And he placed the silver, the gold, and all the articles in the treasuries of the temple of God. Then Solomon gathered together the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the leaders of the ancestral families of the children of Israel to Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of Hashem from the city of David, which is Zion. All the men of Israel gathered before the king on the festival of Sukkot, which is in the 7th month. All the elders of Israel came, and the Levites bore the ark. They brought up the ark and the tent of meeting, and all the sacred articles that were in that tent. The Kohanim and the Levites brought them up. King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel, who had assembled with him before the ark, offered up sheep and cattle, too abundant to be numbered or counted. The Kohanim brought the ark of the covenant of Hashem to its place, to the inner sanctum of the temple, to the Holy of Holies, to beneath the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark. The cherubim covered over the ark and its staves from above. They extended the staves so that the tips of the stave from the ark were noticeable upon the partition, but were not showing on the outside. They remained there to this very day. Nothing was in the ark but the 2 stone tablets that Moses placed there in Horeb, which Hashem covenanted with the children of Israel when they left Egypt. And it was as the Kohanim left the sanctuary, for all the Kohanim who were present had sanctified themselves. The divisions were not observed. The Levites, all of whom were singers, Asaph, Heman, Jeduthun, and their sons and kinsmen were dressed in linen, with cymbals, lyres, and harps, and stood on the east of the altar. With them were 120 Kohanim blowing trumpets. There was unison among the trumpeters and the singers, sounding out in one voice to praise and give thanksgiving to Hashem. And when the sound of the trumpets and cymbals and other musical instruments sounded out, with the praise of Hashem, For he is good, for his kindness is forever. And the cloud filled the house, the temple of Hashem. And the Kohanim could not stand and minister because of the cloud, for the glory of Hashem filled the temple of God. Hello and welcome back. I know that we read about the Temple of Solomon when we read through it in the book of Kings. However, can we just talk about this building for a second? The use of gold is so extensive and crazy. The only way to describe it is to say that its use is excessive. So what does that mean? Remember, this is not a place where humans are going to go and visit. This is essentially the house of God. The Levites, the sons of Aaron, and all of the special helpers, these were the only ones allowed. The Holy of Holies was excluded to everybody in the whole world except for one guy, and that was the chief priest. So the gold and the ornate design and all of these things was not intended to impress other humans because nobody was ever going to see it. It was intended to honor God. So the gold and the ornate design of the temple was never intended to impress any humans. It was singularly to honor the name of their God, Hashem, house of God. Today, if you walk into one of these church buildings, I don't know if we can make good comparisons. There are some amazing buildings that have, incredible seats and there's lights and smokes. It's unbelievable. But it's just regular. The toilets are not made out of gold or anything like that. No matter. And I would wonder what it would be like today. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. The NQE is out.